Thanks, Clarence. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Michael, for inviting us here. I'm going to focus a little bit of time on natural gas in particular because Clarence talked a little bit about natural gas, but also technology, and there really are some huge fundamental changes going on in natural gas. So 3 points. One, technology and impact and what that means for North American supply of natural gas, A, and B, hence the affordability of natural gas, and then the changing price variable in natural gas, because I think that's something that's going on that's pretty dramatic. It implies changes both for the industry, consumers, but definitely policymakers as it relates to the way in which we think about the cost of addressing greenhouse gas emissions, and then finally just the need for sound policy or fair policy with respect to natural gas and other fuels and conservation. So let me dive into it on that front. Definitely a lot of changes going on in the gas industry, and we're pretty excited about all of that. And they really are transformational changes on a variety of fronts, with respect to drilling, with respect to the new shale plays, et cetera. And frankly, even though the last time this group met was 2 years ago, from a gas industry perspective, it might as well have been 2 decades ago with the changes and the current pace of change. It's definitely allowed us to access unconventional gas plays that haven't been available to us, at least from an economic perspective. Here in British Columbia, the Montney and the Horn River plays, which many people talk about, really are fundamental changes. Obviously in places like Louisiana, the Haynesville, and now in Pennsylvania and New York, the Marcellus, all of which have interesting challenges, but totally changed that landscape. None of which these new unconventional gas supplies, they were all available and around 2 years ago, but we just did not have the technology to go after them. So what does that mean? Well, last summer, the Potential Gas Committee, which announced and consistent with EIA results, and what does it mean for gas supply? It means that in the last 4 years, we're seeing a 58% increase in North American gas supplies. And so we've now got enough reserves in North America to last for about a century, which obviously has big implications because the demand for natural gas is also increasing. The same EIA suggests that natural gas demand in Canada and the United States is going to move from about 27 trillion cubic feet annually to about 36 trillion cubic feet. That's huge. Big implications for infrastructure, which obviously could create a lot of jobs. Obviously big implications for things like storage and pipelines, the business that we're in. This might sound like a big task, spending $6 or $10 billion a year on new infrastructure, but in fact that's what the industry is spending now, so it's definitely possible for us to be able to get there. But technology also, think about Moore's Law. So Moore's Law was created in 1965 by one of the founders of Intel, Gordon Moore, who said that at that point in time was talking about transistors going on a microchip and that they would double every 24 months. That's changed dramatically over the years, and now they say technology doubles every 18 months. So what we thought was grand and impossible 18 months ago is frankly becoming commonplace, and we're definitely outpacing ourselves from a technological perspective. And for the gas industry, that means the ability for us to assess and access the gas that previously was not uneconomic or not able to get a hold of, we're now able to get at it. So think about what that means, because there is a multiplier effect on this whole front. Our ability to take advantage of these growing shale plays, of the natural gas supply and abundance, really means that not only can we use this new technology, but it makes existing technologies that much more important. If you've got more supplies, if you've got more price stability, then we can use the existing technologies that are there. For example, if you converted fuel oil power plants to natural gas, that would cut outputs of greenhouse gas emissions from those plants by close to 30%. If you take simple cycle natural gas plants and you make them combined cycle, that applies a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases emissions from those plants. Converting near end-of-life coal plants to natural gas is about a 45% reduction, and there's a lot of discussion these days about taking natural gas vehicles, particularly fleets, maybe even rail, and large 18-wheelers, et cetera, and putting them on natural gas, equally beneficial from a greenhouse gas perspective. And then with so much gas being available, the technological advances also kick in when it comes to the household, where appliances are becoming far more efficient, and greater use of natural gas appliances imply great benefits for us as well. Today it takes the same amount of gas to heat 65 million homes in North America as it took to heat 35 million homes in 1970. Put another way, you've got a 70% increase in the last 40 years in natural gas consumers, but a 40% reduction in what they're using. That's a massive benefit. And obviously, the technology leads to changes in costs, which is the second point I want to talk about. In the gas industry, same in the oil industry and power industry, you often tend to focus on price, the absolute price of the commodity. But maybe that's something we've got to start looking at again and thinking, have we changed the risk profile given the technology and the advancements in the way we're actually accessing some of these resources, that we need to reprogram ourselves, at a minimum, relook at some of the economics and the risks associated with risk-adjusted economics in our business. Just 12 months ago, so that's 2/3 of the 18-month Moore's law of changing technology every 24 months. In the Marcellus region, $5 gas would have implied a return for a producer of about 12%. Today, that's 25%. That is an unbelievable change driven by technology, lower drilling costs, well spacing, horizontal drilling, many of the things you hear about in the natural gas industry lately. But what it says to me that perhaps the returns at various natural gas prices are far more important than the absolute price. So, are we concerned about $5 natural gas or $4 natural gas if you can earn the same amount of returns or even greater returns than you could a year ago? Definitely going to change the landscape of the natural gas business, but definitely going to change the way in which policymakers and ourselves need to look at how we're going to deal with greenhouse gases and what role do fuels like natural gas and other carbon fuels play in that. So technology, big benefit, definitely changing the landscape from an environmental perspective as well. And price, definitely a win-win from a producer perspective, from a consumer perspective, and I would argue a policymaker's perspective. But technology and price, I don't think are enough either. Because the problem is we've got to have the right policies in place. And unfortunately, with the changes we see in areas like the gas industry, the last 12 to 36 months, if you're using a policy playbook that's 12 to 36 months out of date, and no criticism of government, that's generally what happens, you're in a totally different world. I mean, and we need to be very thoughtful, obviously, as an industry and industry players, to be able to collaborate with government, to convince them of some of the changes that are going on and the benefits that natural gas can actually supply from a greenhouse gas perspective and sustainable development perspective if we're going to take advantage of a changing opportunity. Typically, energy policy in North America has been driven by price volatility. And maybe we won't see the same type of price volatility. I wouldn't suggest we'll see no price volatility, but I would suggest from natural gas it's going to be a lot less than it's been in the past because of these new supplies. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to move forward on the policy front. We've definitely got to work a lot closer with policymakers to get the right policies, and we've got to move away from the either-or solution. Clarence mentioned no silver bullet. I think that's probably a common theme you'll find here. There is no silver bullet. Moving away from the either or ultimatums is critical. It's not coal versus nuclear. It's not wind versus gas. It's not conservation versus production. Frankly, we're going to need the whole slate. Conventional sources, alternatives, obviously, increased efficiency, new generation, and obviously investments into R&D and projects like CCS, which we are very much active in Northeast British Columbia, and hopefully we'll end up with one of the world's largest CCS projects here before too long. But the policy approach has obviously got to be realistic. Again, we're going to consume 50%, or we do consume 50% more energy than we did 20 years ago, and we're probably going to keep similar on that pace, and so no single source is going to be required. Forward-looking, EIA and others say that we're still going to have 80% fossil fuels. So we're going to need all these sources. Nuclear, definitely a viable resource and a clean alternative. But studies indicate that you're going to need 1,000 nuclear reactors, more than twice the number that exists today, to reduce just 25% of the anticipated CO2 emissions that are going to occur between now and 2050. And it takes, under ideal circumstances, 1,500 windmills, each 300 feet tall, to equal the output of one nuclear power plant. And so consider also the footprint of even renewables. A natural gas 1,000 megawatt gas plant takes up about 10 acres. It takes about 10,000 acres for a solar plant to generate the same energy, and about 40,000 acres to generate that much power from wind. The Waxman-Markey bill suggests we're going to have 120 to 130,000 megawatts of incremental wind power by 2030. At 40,000 acres, per 1,000 megawatts, that's about 5 million acres to site this power. So put that into context. That's 4 times the size of Rhode Island. That's 12 times the size of London, and I don't mean London, Ontario, and 25 times the size of New York City. So the point is the alternative sources are definitely going to be needed, but I think we need to be realistic. I think we need to have a focus on what's here, right now. Natural gas provides some of those alternatives, but definitely it is going to take all these paths to get us to a lower carbon economy. So I will leave it there, Mr. Chairman, and move on to Steve.